Hello everybody, Trevor here. Let's talk about anime. Anime is a term for Japanese animation, and it is very popular amongst fans not only in Japan, but also all over the world, including America. While I'm not a huge fan of anime in general, but there are some that I happen to enjoy a lot, even as a kid. But I'll get to that in a little bit. There's also a thing called manga, which is a term for Japanese comic books, and unlike regular comic books, you read them backwards. But that's not important right now. Today, we'll be discussing my top 5 anime. Now, before we begin, I just want to say a few rules. 1. I'm not going to show any clips due to Japan's lack of fair use laws, which is one of the few things I don't like about Japan. And I don't want to risk any copyright strike from any Japanese company. 2. Due to YouTube's community guidelines, I don't want to show any inappropriate stuff, especially the nudity, because I want to keep this channel to be at least PG or PG-13. 3. Because I'm not a huge fan of anime, I'm only going to list the ones that I've grown up with the most as a kid, because some of them I know full well than others. And 4. I'm not going to include Western anime such as Avatar, Samurai Jack, Steven Universe, or the original Teen Titans, since those are made in America. And I only want to include actual anime that was made in Japan. Now with that out of the way, let's start this action-packed adventure. Number 5. Pokemon. Pokemon. One of my favorite childhood anime shows from Cartoon Network. I liked the characters, the music, some of the games that I played, and the overall action. I used to collect some of the Pokemon cards as well. The reason this is number 5 is because as years went by, I'm starting to slowly grow out of it because I'm actually growing tired of the anime itself. I mean, I like Ash Ketchum as a character, but don't you guys just get sick and tired of the same old characters like him and Team Rocket? This is why I prefer the manga and the games because unlike the anime, they focus more on different characters as the main protagonists, and each generation has a new set of villains such as Team Flare from Generation 6. But the only things I still like about Pokemon are some of the games and the first 2 seasons of the anime because back in my youth, Pokemon was refreshing. Let's talk about the games. While I never played any of the first 2 generations of games as a young lad, but my very first games were the original Ruby and Sapphire for the Game Boy Advance. I was new to it at the time, but it was still a lot of fun because it introduced me to the gaming lore of Pokemon, which has its differences from its anime counterparts. I might get Sword and Shield someday, but the problem is, I don't have a Nintendo Switch yet, though I've heard mixed things about Generation 8, but I want to actually play the games in order to give my honest opinion on them. Number 4. Sailor Moon. This is my second favorite anime on Toonami. It's one of the most important Japanese cartoons in animation history. I thought the transformation scenes were pretty cool and elegant. I liked the characters, especially Serena, aka Usagi in Japan. But my most favorite characters are the cats like Luna and Artemis because I think they're pretty cute, even though I'm more of a dog person, but I have some respect for cats in general. Now let's talk about one of the villains. The very first antagonist in the show was Queen Beryl. When I was young, I didn't even know why she was called Queen Beryl because I always think of that wooden container that Donkey Kong likes to smash. But it turns out that beryl is named after a mineral of the same name. You see, many of the villains are named after gemstones and minerals, and Queen Beryl is one of them. And I thought the action and the stories were great! My favorite season was the first season of the show because it introduces us to the main characters like Usagi, and that she was new to this kind of fighting power. She's also a bit of a klutz and a fraidy cat at times, but in later seasons, she learns and grows more and more into a mature queen. And I'll admit, the Viz Media dub is better than the original in terms of staying true to the Japanese version, but I still prefer the original dubs by Deke and Cloverleaf. Sure, the original English dub is terrible at times, but I can't help but feel nostalgic for it. Not only that this is a great anime, but also one of the most important cartoons that shaped anime today, so therefore, I highly recommend this one. Number 3. Speed Racer. And by Speed Racer, I do mean the original 1960s series from Japan. When it comes to TV shows, this is my most favorite of the anime genre because I enjoy the action, the characters, and the stories. Oh, and did you know that it was originally called Mach Go 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 in the Japanese dub? My most favorite episode from that series is the Mammoth Car one. I loved how it was designed, how huge it was, and I thought the Mammoth Car theme was very intense. It always has me on edge. Not to mention that the twist ending where the Mammoth Car was the one carrying the stolen gold, but in a creative way. Another one of my favorite episodes was the one with the car acrobatic team, where they have the power to do different stunts like jump over and do a barrel roll. I even thought Snake Oiler was a pretty good antagonist in that 3-part episode. There are many other episodes I do enjoy, like the one with the Model T, but there isn't any time to talk about them all here. And besides, I just want to get to the next part of the video. But before I do that, I just want to explain two of my favorite characters in the show, Spriddle and Chim Chim. I think these guys are cute and funny, and they serve as comic reliefs of the show. Number 2 is Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland. This movie is about a young boy named Nemo, who keeps having nightmares after eating a pie made by his mom. Then later, he was invited to go to Slumberland since he's apparently the chosen one, and to become heir to King Morpheus' throne. Nemo later broke a promise to the king to never open the forbidden door, and after another nightmare, he decides to make up for his mistake by saving King Morpheus and to find and defeat the Nightmare King. Unfortunately, despite the positive reception, this movie was a flop because it failed to find an audience. And the worst part is, it was production hell, and many people who worked on the film, including Hayao Miyazaki, dropped out after some involvement with the film. I honestly don't care what some of the critics say. I loved this movie so much as a little kid. In fact, it's one of my favorite childhood films. I enjoyed the characters, including Icarus, the cheerful songs, the animation, and the story. In other words, I thought it was really fun. In addition, I like the film's message about keeping your promises and learning to take responsibility. I don't think the film's as bad as what some people make it out to be. While I haven't read any of the original comic strips by Winsor McCay, but I still think this movie works well on its own. It just shows that sometimes being different can be a good thing. I mean, look at Disney's The Jungle Book. It's completely different from the source material, but it still works great on its own. But unfortunately, I can't say the same thing for some other projects. Now before I get to my number 1 pick, here are a bunch of honorable mentions. Dragon Ball Z. I wasn't really a huge fan of it in the first place because I was more into Pokemon at the time. Yu-Gi-Oh! It would have been number 5. And the only problem I have with the show is that the battles are too complex and confusing. That's why I like Pokemon better. Kimba the White Lion, aka Leo the Lion. I did watch a few documentaries and clips of this show on YouTube, and I thought it was kinda weird. You see, I was more into Disney's The Lion King as a kid in terms of animation and consistency. Oh, and there was this controversy saying that The Lion King ripped off Kimba in a lot of ways. I always get confused by this story because I can't tell whether the theories were true or not, so that's why Kimba didn't make it. And my number 1 most favorite anime is various Studio Ghibli films. I love this anime company. They're like the Disney of Japan. And unlike most anime, which are inappropriate for most viewers, they make some of the best movies, including Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Castle in the Sky, Kiki's Delivery Service, and my most favorite of them all, My Neighbor Totoro, particularly the Fox dub, not the Disney dub. They also make some good adult movies too, like The Wind Rises, which is about a man named Jiro who dreams of designing and flying beautiful airplanes, and was inspired by an Italian man named Caproni. What's interesting about this movie is that it was Hayao Miyazaki's last film to write and direct before retirement. Oh, and this character, Castor, reminds me of Jimmy Durante because of his big nose. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha! Now let's talk about my most favorite childhood anime, My Neighbor Totoro. Like Little Nemo, I used to watch the original Fox version of it all the time when I was a boy. I enjoyed the characters, the setting, the music, and the beautiful animation. Oh, and no offense to the Fanning sisters or anybody who prefers the Disney dub, but I like the original streamlined dub better in terms of emotion in the voice acting, as well as certain translations. For example, while in the Disney dub, those black smoky things are called soot gremlins, but in the original dub I've grown up with, they were called dust bunnies, and I think dust bunny sounds cuter than soot gremlins. The new dub, in my opinion, doesn't really sound very emotional. But if you like it, that's perfectly understandable. Just try to understand where I'm coming from. Now tell me in the comment section on which anime is your favorite. Do you like anime in general, or are you like me who prefers certain types of shows like Thomas the Tank Engine? Oh, and speaking of Thomas, don't worry guys, my next video will be about Thomas the Tank Engine, whether it be about the Renaissance era or some other Thomas topic. And to those who are asking about a top 5 Sailor Moon episodes or top 5 episodes of any anime series, well, I'm not going to do those because I don't watch anime all the time, and I'm more obsessed with shows that are either in the US, Canada, or in the UK. This is Trevor Davis saying, sayonara.